The President, please be seated. The court is now back in session, and we would like to hand the floor over to the co-prosecutor to continue putting the documents.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Before the break, we were talking about the fact that the government at the time in 1976 had said that it had assumed, as from the time when the nature of the regime changed, that is in April 1976, the regime had stated that it had assumed its responsibilities fully and in their entirety regarding all the activities involved. We see that in document E3/817 and E3/1.8, that is two documents dealing with the same thing. We see that they're talking about the activities of the document. We have two reports on the activities of the ministers, and I will quote only one of those documents. It is titled First Meeting of the Council of Ministers, presentation by Comrade Party Secretary on the 22nd of April 1976. The extract deals specifically with the nature and definition of the government of Democratic Cambodia, and we find this extract on page 1 in Khmer, that is 0072753, and in English it is on page 2, ERN 00143461, and in French it is on page 1, ERN 0054888994, and this is what the First Secretary Pol Pot states, and I quote, "Our government is not a coalition as in the past. The errors and the successes and the good things and the bad things, the gains and the losses, both within the country and abroad, with regard to friends and enemies, we assume total responsibility thereof. There is no one else apart from ourselves." And further down, in this regard, the members of government and members of the committees in all the areas must master the nature of our government and our role, and they must strive to fulfill their tasks well, following the party line. End of quote. I will read a second extract of the same document, E3/817, and the Khmer ERN is 000-72761, and in English it is 00143467, and in French it is on pages 6 and 7, ERN 00548899 up to 8900. Under Title 3, the task of the government of Democratic Cambodia, Pol Pot talks of 4 principal tasks: implement the constitution, defend the country, construct the country, and assemble friendly forces worldwide. And let me quote what he states regarding the defense of the country. Point B, and I quote, "It is imperative to defend revolutionary power and the achievements of the revolution. We must defend the party. We must defend the people, the army, the revolutionary army. We must defend the independence, the sovereignty, etc., against every form of enemy activity, both overt and covert. We must always be in high revolutionary vigilance, always be in mastery. End of quote. We've talked about the application of the policies of the party by the various ministers as far as the enemy is concerned. This brings me to a document that I will present regarding the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The first document has already been dealt with during proceedings, but it is so vast, and now we propose to look at some aspects. It's document E3/522, and it is reference E3/926, and it is the notebook of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which apparently only concerned the year 1976. Let me point out with regard to this document that there is a good version and a bad version of the document in the Khmer. The good version has the ERN number 00427814 up to 00427964. And unfortunately, as I have already pointed out, I believe earlier, the French version was translated from the Bat Khmer version, and there are two missing pages, and the pages are in an inverted order. Now, this document, which is very important with regard to the substance and the volume, has to do with communication, internal communication in B1, the structure of B1, that is the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the role of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the ideology of the CPK as disseminated within the ministry. This document contains several parts which have to do with various meetings held at B1. It also talks of a cellular assembly dated the 22nd of May 1976, an assembly of the Ministry of B1 of the 10th of July 1976, a ministerial plan designed in 1976 for 1 year, 1976 to 1977. An entire section of the document has to do with meetings of self-criticism, that is self-criticism and criticism, presided by Brother Van. Then we also have the minutes of another meeting dated December 1976. Now, what do we find in this document regarding the structure of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs? The document provides some details regarding the sectors and departments in the ministry, and the Khmer reference is 00827849. And the specificity of this Khmer version is that when you open the agenda of the meeting, you find at the top of each page the dates, the 14th and the 15th of March, and the ERN in English is 00003267, and in French it is 00657989. Here we find the various departments of B1. 1, and I quote, Propaganda and Education Unit. 2, Office. 3, the sector on general production. 4, Political sector. 5, Protocol Office. 6, Secretariat and Administration. In English, it's translated as Secretariat and Assembly. And 7, civil aviation. There is another passage under the title, meeting of the 15th of December 1976. And in it we find statistics regarding the staff of the ministry in 1976, as well as a classification of people who work there in various categories. And the Khmer page is 00427928. 00427928, and in English it is quadruple 03321, and in French it is 00657891, and it reads as follows, and I quote: number of people in Tak Mao, 12 people for male youth, 9 elderly, 4 female youth, and on the same page below, the front members want to undergo training in political affairs. We have 640 people in Ministry B, and 54 people are children. In the market, 98 people. In the area of farming, 18 persons. And Siem Reap, 25 persons. Kampot, 20 persons. Kampong Som, 36 persons. B1, 108 people. M1, 118 people, including 8 children. And mention is also made of other houses and experts in the Korean and Chinese embassies. The last point regarding the structure of B1, as we learned from this document, this is something important because as of December 1976, and we find this in the Khmer page 00427949, and in English it is quadruple 033 36 up to 33 37. There is no French translation, and the ERN in Khmer is 00427949, and in English it's quadruple 03336 up to 3337. There is no existing French translation. This passage has to do with the structure of B1, and I will quote this passage in English because there is no French version of it.
Assignment issues. Number 6, the Cell Committee of the Ministry. 1. Brother Van, Secretary. 2. Comrade Hong, Deputy Secretary. 3. Comrade Reun, Member. 4. Comrade Ven, Member. And 5. Comrade Chim, Member. End of quote. Nous avons eu évidemment plusieurs.
There are obviously several members of the committee who have testified before the chamber. Second point regarding the second chapter and the passage of this document E3/122. This has to do with the section that has to deal with self-criticism. It is possible to identify a number of cadres from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs when you read the contents of this passage regarding self-examination. The title is Constructive Opinions of the Collectivity of the 11th of December 1976, and we find it in the following pages. Khmer 00427907 up to page 427926. In English, the page is quadruple 03304 to quadruple 03320. It is impossible to give you all the pages in French because they are scattered throughout the French translations. In this section, the officials that are engaged in self-criticism are the following: Comrade Nu, Chim, and would presume that this is Peep 1, Dean, D-E-A-N, Mun, M-O-E-U-N, Mun, M-U-N, T-H-I-T, Hong, one would presume is So Hong, Tuch, T-O-U-C-H, Su, and we are told that he is in Thailand, and others, including Kong, K-O-N-H. One would assume that is Son Sekun, alias Kon. For each of these persons, we find that their qualities and failings or shortcomings are mentioned. Let me give you an example page in Khmer 0042 7850. So it is 0042 7850, and in English it is quadruple 03267, and in French it is 00657884. It has to do with the self-examination of Comrade Mun. Let me quote point 2 regarding political affairs, defects or shortcomings. He is disoriented after hearing that the population had nothing to eat. Following point. During the study, we heard that enemies had infiltrated and sowed the seeds of panic. End of quote. Through the self-examination of Comrade Mun, dated 1976, we understand that some information regarding famine had been disseminated within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. After the passages, or after each passage in which officials engage in self-criticism, we find the comments made by Brother Van, that is Ieng Seri. This passage is quite long, and it includes comments and self-criticisms. He makes comments on self-criticisms of Cameron Nun, Hong, Meng, Chim, Din, and Su. Let me give you two examples of Brother Van's comments. That is the comments of Ieng Seri, first of all, regarding Kong, that is So Hong. In Khmer, the ERM number is 0042 7916. And in English, it is quadruple 03310. And in French, it is 00657883. Let me quote what Comrade Van says regarding Hong. Cause, there are three shortcomings. One, he is not yet imbued with the lines of the socialist revolution. He does not yet master the nature of the class struggle firmly. We must understand the antagonisms that exist in the society. Two, the petit bourgeois ideology, tendency to make class compromises. Three, is not yet imbued with the organizational principles of the party. End of quote. We find that here there are a number of subjects that are very often recurrent in the publications of the party. A second example of Brother Van's comments is what he tells Sue, who was working in Thailand at the time. And the passage in Khmer is 00427924, and in English it is *0003318, and in French it is 00657889. So this is what Van says to Sue regarding his major shortcomings. The ideology and the position of the proletarian class are not yet solid. One would still think that the intellectuals are those in leadership. Regarding those who have degrees, we have to redouble our vigilance as much as possible. End of quote. I would now like to look at other sections of the same document that have to do with the position of the Minister of Foreign Affairs regarding enemies and social classes. In the section regarding cell assemblies of the 22nd of May 1976, we find the following on page ERN Khmer 00427822. Let me repeat 00427822. And in English it is *0003247. And in French it is 00657828. I quote, disadvantages. The political level of the masses is still weak. That is to say, they don't yet know how to investigate and control enemies. The masses are still peaceful or peaceable. 2 or 3 pages further down, in Khmer it is 00427825. And in English it is *03249. And in French it is 00657829. And we read the following. Duties. You must increase your spirit of revolutionary vigilance and crack down on all the enemy's tactics, regardless of the cost. The ministry B1 has 4 types of masses. The progressive masses, and people who are not evolving, that is the second and third categories. End of quote. Another quotation, which is under the minutes of the B1 Assembly of the 10th of July 1976, is found on the following pages in Khmer, ERN 00427830. I repeat, 00427830. In English, it is *0003252.
0065.
And in French, it is 00657832. Under Title 2, the situation of the society in democratic Cambodia, and we read the following, and I quote, the victory of the 17th of April 1975 is more grandiose than it is itself, because than the Angkor era itself, because in Cambodian society we have egalitarianism. There are no longer any rich or poor. There are no feudalists. There are no capitalists. There are no petty bourgeois. All we have are workers and farmers. End of quote. And this is the conception of the class struggle and the objective of egalitarianism. In this document, we also find a reference to the evacuation of towns, still with regard to the class struggle. And the Khmer page is 00427856. In English, it is *0003270-71. And in French, it is 00657846. Let me quote. The struggle against capitalism. We have defeated enemies. In 1973, we created cooperatives. On the 17th of April, our anchor was very clever. It annihilated the capitalists nationwide from an organizational standpoint. End of quote. Let me press on with what is said regarding enemies within the ranks. Another quotation, the Khmer is 00427844. In English, it is *0003262. And in French, it is 00657991. I will read from point number 2, and I quote. The gnawing and infiltration within. 1 to 5% of people are working. We have to study biographies thoroughly, as well as study meetings of self-examination clearly, particularly in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. All embassies would like to know about our leaders for 2 reasons: to be in a position to report back to their countries. Secondly, they have other objectives in mind. End of quote. And there is another passage that I will read as well. In Khmer, it is on page 00427940, and in English, it is *0003331. In French, 00657902. Interpreter correction, I pointed out earlier that it was 1 to 5% of the people working, but 1 to 5% of the people were traitors. 6, situation of the enemies in Cambodia. The year 1976 was the key year. The enemies are decrepit, are weakening, are ready to die. The revolution has pulled out their roots, and the espionage networks have been smashed. In terms of classes, our enemies are all gone. However, they are still American imperialists. The CIA, the revisionists, the KGB, and the Vietnamese.
Qu'ils aient capitulé.
Even though they have capitulated, they can still block us. Another thing is that the enemies are inside our body, among the military, the workers, in the cooperatives, and even in our ranks, making socialist revolution deeply and strongly. These enemies must be progressively wiped out as soon as possible. End of quote. And finally, a last excerpt. Khmer ERN 00427946. English 00003334 to 35, and French 00657905. And I quote, "It is necessary to prepare the conditions to ensure security properly, to follow the biographies of all people within the ministry, to gather all of the weapons and ammunition and to send them to headquarters. We also have to follow closely the enemies within the ministries." End of quote, free translation. So we will notice that with all of these quotes, that the idea of following the biographies carefully or the enemies is a topic that is currently commonly brought up during the meetings at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And now I would like to turn to another document, which is E3/857. And this is a report from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs titled "Cooperation with all of the units, 12 September 1977. And here, this is a document that was produced after the agenda of which I have read out excerpts. And I'm going to read out 4 excerpts from this document, E3/857. And the first excerpt is on page 00 in Khmer, 000-86707. 000-86707. English, 00355487. And French, 00811327. And I believe it's the first page of the document. And I quote, free translation, "Summary of the reports of all units. First of all, enemy activity. In our ministerial meetings, we noticed that we were successful in cleaning out and in fundamentally getting rid of the enemies who are CIA members, or who are KGB members, or who are among the UN invaders. Eliminate and cleaning in depth, quote unquote, means that the governing agent of the enemy preparing coup d'etat to seize the power of the peasants and workers was cleaned out and purged. We agreed on the purges against the enemies and on the necessity to clean our ministry as well as each unit in which enemies are present." End of quote. The second excerpt, and on the same page, and also continues on to the following page, and I quote, free translation, "In general, 98% of our ministry is clean. This means that they understand that it is necessary to clean out the enemies. The 2 remaining % continue with their activities. And a little bit further, we must make sure that these 2% do not propagate, because if something happens to us, they will take advantage of this to increase in size. They will go from 2% to 3%, 4%, 5%, little by little. We must therefore surround them and reduce them from 2% to 1.5%, 1%, or even 0.5%. Generally speaking, our ministry has a very high level of vigilance. And when we feel that something is abnormal, we report on it. Therefore, an enemy stated, open quote, later on everyone will end up being arrested. Only Bang Sampong will remain. Close quote. Our comrades have analyzed the sentence in order to come into contact with this person. After having interrogated this person, we understood that he is part of the enemy networks. It's true that our ministry is already doing a good job, but we have to be careful about these 2% that are acting under a leader. And we have to reinforce our revolutionary vigilance because our ministry has links with many, many foreign embassies. End of quote. Third excerpt on the Khmer page 00086-708 to 709, English 00355489, French 008711, Zero, sorry, 00811 328 to 329. And I quote, this is point 4, free translation again, strengthening Ankar at all levels. Recently, our party ranks have been reduced because of the elimination of the enemies. But we have better quality now. Our brothers and sisters are all aware of this, and they all understand spontaneously the enemy's ploys boring within our ranks. A bit later, in this strengthening process, we have to pay attention to the classes, and we have to favor the working class, the poor peasants, the medium peasants, and the lower peasants. In particular, we must examine carefully their biographies, their revolutionary spirit, their revolutionary biography, without forgetting to ask for the agreement of the masses. End of quote. Fourth and last excerpt from this document, which is an important document about the enemies, and ERN 00086-710-11, English 00355-491, French 00811331. Free translation again, under the heading 3, tasks to take on to further the socialist revolution. And I quote, this is also a main task. Some are able to complete their tasks properly, but they're, however, dominated by the capitalist and petit bourgeois spirit. We consider them as bad elements because they cannot fulfill the tasks linked to the furthering of the socialist revolution. Furthering the socialist revolution means abolishing individual property, struggling against social classes, having a strong stance towards the enemies, and distinguishing properly people on our side from the enemies, and we should not mix them up, and we should eliminate the people who are individualist. End of quote. So regarding this distinction between what the document terms as enemies on the one hand and those on our side on the other hand, the following is said on page Khmer 0086712, English 00355493, French 00811332. And I quote, free translation again. Making efforts in the education of political principles so that the population may make the distinction between those on our side and the enemies. Those on our side mean the party, the revolution, the population, the authorities belonging to the working and peasant class. And all of these people belong to the revolution. As far as the term enemy designates everything that is non-revolutionary and all those who are anti-revolutionary. So we should not mix up the enemies with the revolution. End of quote. So now I'm going to backtrack to the structure of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and to the positions held by certain cadres. It is useful in order to understand what the Ministry of Foreign Affairs entailed to look at some of the prisoner lists from S21. When these lists involve prisoners coming from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. As an example, I will look at document E3/154, 13 corrects interpreter 1534, which is a prisoner's list from S21 titled Names of the Prisoners Coming from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. There is no French version available. So this is a two-page document that is under ERN 00087-007 in Khmer 2009. So it's 3 pages in Khmer. English 0018166769. And the latest date on this document is 15 April 1978. And there are 43 names in this list. And if we could display it on the screen, we can see that among these 43 names, there are more than 10 students who had returned from abroad, in particular from France. And therefore, they are considered as falling under the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And there are also cadres and combatants from the ministry. For example, on line 3, Mr. Keo Chien, who was a combatant at the Bong Trabek office. He entered S21 on 25 February 1978. And we notice here that the Bong Trabek office, according to this document, was already under the aegis of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in 1978. And in this list, there are combatants from offices B62 and B64. There are cadres from the embassies abroad, in particular number 20, Mik Tuch, who was the ambassador to Laos, and 36, Lin Serivut, the third secretary in Beijing. These are people we already spoke about during the previous hearings. And there are also cadres coming from B1, such as at line 21, Van Pini, who is referred to as Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, or at line 31, Svai Bori, from the Information and Propaganda section of the ministry. Their spouses are also listed here. And finally, and this is also worth noting, at posting 19 in this list, there is a cadre coming from Sector 15, who was the Deputy Secretary of Sector 15, therefore in the West Zone. This is Tep Hai alias Han, who entered S21 on 15 April 1978, and who is also included in a list from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I have 15 minutes left, and I won't be able to finish today, Mr. President. We started this morning at 9:30, so a bit late. But I would like to start, however, speaking about the Ministry of Commerce. Regarding the Committee of Commerce, you will remember that earlier on, its composition was described in a decision from the Standing Committee from 1920-21 April 1976. This was document E3/235. And its composition back then of the Commerce Committee in 1976 was the following: Comrade Ritt, Nem, Nhem, therefore, Chun, Chhoeun. All three of them were members. And we will get back to the fate of Nem and Chun later. Now I would like to show you a first document, which is the written record of the meeting of the Standing Committee of 13 March 1976, which focuses on commerce. And this is document E3/233 and E3/234. On the first page, we can see that the participants to this meeting are Comrade Secretary. And we can imagine that this was Pol Pot Committee Deputy Secretary Nunche, Comrade Van, therefore Yang Sari, Comrade Kyo Son Sen, Comrade Hem, Kyo Sampan, Comrade Tuich, Thoch Koitun, that is to say, Comrade Dun, that is Suvasi, and Secretary Tuich, Touch. And it's interesting to note here that Comrade Tuich, that is Koitun, is present at this meeting on commerce on 13 March 1976, whereas as of April 1976, as we saw, his name no longer appears in the government lists. And during this meeting of 13 March 1976, the Standing Committee took the decision of creating, in the field of commerce, a committee in charge of preparing supplies that had to be purchased, and it is composed as follows. And this is listed on the first page of the document in all three languages. I quote, Comrade Tuk, Thoch, President, Comrade Hem, Member, and then three advisory members, Comrade Van, Vaughan, and Deun, and a reporter, Comrade Tuk, Touch. So we can see that beyond, outside of the President Koitun, who will disappear later, there is only one effective member here, and this is Kyo Sampan. And second and last excerpt of this document, E3/233, it is on page Khmer, 5 times 0, 749. So that is to say 0000749. French on page 2. ERN 00 30 13 33. English 00 18 26 50. And this is the composition of a committee regarding banks, and it was made up by the Standing Committee, and the following people are listed, and this is the... We see this, the list is in the opposite order in relation to the other committee, because Comrade Hem is president here. Comrade Tuk, therefore, Koitun is member, and there are 2 advisory members, Comrade Van and Comrade Deun, and a rapporteur, Comrade Tuk, Touch, end of quote. And there is another record from the meeting of the Standing Committee, dated 7 May 1976, and which focuses on issues related to commerce. And this is document E3/220, E3/220. And attended this meeting the Deputy Secretary, the Secretary, Comrade Van, Hem, Vaughan, and Deun. And this is the excerpt which I would like to read out, and I quote, free translation. After the reports of the Super Comrade Deun regarding the Commerce Department, the meeting decided to organize 1. The Commerce Committee, and to transfer Super Comrade Chey, Chey, from agriculture to lead commerce. Super Comrade Dun will go down to commerce for 3 months. May, June, and July. 1 half day at the office. This is Office 870, as we saw. And 1 half day at commerce. Point 2, go to Hong Kong. Have Super Comrade Rit go to Hong Kong with Comrade Su once more to make contact for purchases. End of quote. So a little comment here regarding what happened to Comrade Che, C-H-E-Y. So this is Che Sun alias Nun Sun alias Sen. And he was arrested in 1976. He was executed at S21. And there is a confession on the case file that he gave at S21 indexed IS 5.69 and also E190. I repeat, I apologize. E190.1.14, dated November 1976. And it seems, therefore, that he was prevented from playing an important role at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, as was expected previously. Comrade Dun, as we are going to see now through some documents, continued with his supervision work and continued leading the Commerce Committee, not until July, as the Standing Committee stated then, but at least until the end of September 1976. And later on, Dun entered S21 at the beginning of 1977. And on the case file, we have a confession dated 19 February 1977, indexed E3 1625. E3/1625. So now let's look at why we can claim that Comrade Dun continued with his activities at the Commerce Committee until the end of September 1976, because there are 4 reports on the case file that were sent by the Commerce Committee to Brother Dun, the respected Brother Dun, regarding the trade relations with North Korea. And these 4 reports are indexed as IS 18.11 from 21 August 1976, IS 18.12 from 28 August 1976, D366/7.1.823, and I repeat, D366/7.1.823 of 7 September 1976, and document IS 18.14, which is the last document on the case file and which is dated 30 September 1976. After this, as we will see, all of the reports will be sent to Que Sampan. So I'm simply going to quote one of these reports that was sent by the Commerce Committee to Brother Dun, and this is document D366/7.1.823 of 7 September 1976. And this is a report relating to a meeting between members of the Commerce Committee and friends, North Korean friends, as stated. And if we look at the end of this document, we will see that this report, as other reports from the Commerce Committee, were copied to Office K1, to Office 51, and to the Interior Commerce and to Archives. And we noticed that 3 cadres attended on behalf of the Ministry of Commerce, this meeting with the North Koreans, Comrade Chun, and we said that he was a member of the committee, Uncle Hong, H-O-N-G, and Comrade Mol. And the discussions were focused on the establishment of trade relations and on a regular communication between North Korea and Democratic Kampuchea. So as of the end of October 1976, at the latest, it's no longer to Dun, but to Hem, that is to say, Kyosampan, that reports of this kind were addressed, and this until the end of the regime of Democratic Kampuchea. And we can therefore see about 28 reports that were addressed to Kyosampan between 29 October 1976 and 3 December 1978. 5 involved meetings with North Koreans, about 10 meetings with the Chinese, and about 10 others about meetings with the Yugoslavs. And I'm going to mention 2 representative examples of this category of documents. The first example is document IS 18.19, which is dated 1 November 1976. And this is the report from the Commerce Committee to the attention of Brother Hem, the respected and well-beloved Brother Hem. This is a 2-page report, and what we would like to look at are 2 things in this report. First of all, on the first page, the following is stated, and I quote, free translation, opinion from our North Korean friends. 1, regarding the water compressors, our Korean friends would like to know how many of these compressors we need. These compressors allow these pumps to operate properly. Our opinion, that is to say, the opinion of the Cambodian delegation, and I quote, we are waiting for Ankara's decision before we provide them with an answer. And second passage, I believe it's the same page on point 2, regarding 80 tons of sesame and 1,000 tons of grain. Our North Korean friends say the following: but next time they will not take any sesame because their government stressed that the Kampuchean people was underfed. Once there will be enough food in Kampuchea, they will then take sesame. Our opinion, we thank our Korean friends for their understanding in regard to the scarcity of food in our country, but next year there will be enough food in our country. So it's interesting to notice that the scarcity of food in Cambodia was already known in 1976 by the North Koreans. But despite this, Democratic Kampuchea was already exporting foods such as this report shows to us.
Mr. President.
D'exploiter un dernier document ou si vous souhaitez interrompre, suspendre l'audience maintenant.
Oh, sorry, the microphone wasn't. I don't know, Mr. President, if you would like us to look at another document or if you'd like to adjourn for today. Thank you.
The President, thank you, Mr. Co-Prosecutor. It is indeed appropriate moment already for today's adjournment. However, before we adjourn, the Chamber wishes to inform the parties to the proceedings that the Chamber will not be sitting during tomorrow and the day after tomorrow due to the fact that we have been informed by the Office of Administration that national members, staff member of the court are allowed to be on leave to check their names or name on the voting list. So the chamber will not will not be convened until the 18th of October, and document hearing will continue. The co-prosecutor will have the opportunity to finish their part on the submission of the putting documents before the chamber, to be followed up by the lead co-lawyers for the civil party. Security personnel are now instructed to bring Mr. Nunji and Kyu Somporn back to the detention facility and have them return to the courtroom by the 18th of October at 9 a.m. The court is adjourned.